I'm not really quick.
Are you ever ready, Len?
No, God.
Make sure you just talk right into the mic.
Oh, I'm a microphone.
All right, hi guys. My name's Kevin Knight. I run a website called eatgeekplay.com, as well as a besides the website, I do podcasts. And I've been a big fan of the Long Beach Comic Con and everything for a long time. This year they actually asked me to do some panels. And they sent me a list of people to interview for the one-on-ones. And your name was on it. And I've talked to everybody else on that list, and you're the only person I haven't had any kind of conversation with because I've been afraid.
My reputation precedes me.
Well, it's not even that. It's the fact that without you, Len, I wouldn't be a comic book geek.
Oh, God, another one.
I'm sure you hear this all the time.
I actually do, and it's intimidating.
But Len, I want to shake your hand. Thank you.
You are very welcome.
Thank you, because you are the reason I am who I am.
If they ever arrest you, please don't tell them that.
The first comic book I ever read was X-Men #1.
Yes.
And then my sister was actually dating a guy who he saw I had a collection of the Origins of Marvel Comics, and it had X-Men #1. I read X-Men #1 I don't know how many times. And he's like, "Oh, you like X-Men? Here, I got something for you." And he handed me Giant Size #1. So I kind of got a little history lesson right there, you know. That was it. I never looked back. And so it always blew my mind. I'm like, Giant Size #1, who's this Len Wein guy? For some reason, I connected to writers right away. I was like, because I just love the craft. I myself wanted to be a writer when I was a kid. So it's like, wait, what happened to this Len Wein guy? Why isn't he writing anymore?
I was running the company, wasn't it?
So can we, obviously we're here to talk about Len's career, and if you guys have any questions, please stop and you know, let me know. But Len, when did you realize that you were a writer? Was there a moment like when you were like, hey, I think I might be able to do this for a living?
Yes and no, all at the same time. It's very strange. I became a comics fan when I was 7 years sick.
What was the first comic you read?
I think it was Batman. I'm almost sure because I'm a huge Batman.
Nice.
But I was in the hospital and my dad, God rest him, brought me a huge stack of comic books. Back when they were only a dime each, so you could buy a huge stack of comic books. And I got hooked. I became a comic book fan from that point on. When fandom started getting organized by Julie Schwartz's letter columns back in the 60s, I became a member of a fan club called Tysos. Many of the members of whom ended up growing up to be professional writers.
Really?
Or people in the business.
Really?
Myself, Marv Wolfman, Andy Yanchus became a colorist for us at Marvel.
Wow.
Well, a couple of the other guys too. Irene Vartanov.
Was this just like, when you say fandom, back then, you were just writing letters to each other? Or
Yeah, no,
like,
we all lived close enough that we could get together.
So you had like almost like a club?
It was not like a club, it was a club.
Oh, really?
It was called Tysos, T-I-S-O-S.
Really?
Which stood for the illegitimate sons of Superman. and in fact, it was named by Mark Hannerfeld, who's one of our members. Oh. Mark later on went on to be the model for Abel, of Cain and Abel, and House of Mystery, and became Joe Orlando's assistant editor for a while.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of guys in our little fan club went on to be professionals of some sort or another.
Why do you think that was?
We were persistent little bastards.
Really?
Yeah, we were.
So, was that the point then where you were meeting with these guys and
I told you not to do that.
Was that the point when you were like, all right, I think I can write comic books, sure. And that's
me, I'm sorry. I win. I know who this is. It's the right person. Hello. I'm at my panel, I'm good. I'm in room
202C.
202C. 202C. 202 count. Okay, cool.
202 cow, I like that. That's a good one.
First thing I thought of, pure sex.
You geeks not enough right there, man. I didn't even go to Colossus. I didn't think about that. So anyway,
So
yeah.
I became a comic book fan, joined comics fandom, met Marv Wolfman through Julian Schwartz and Laura Collins, and
Sorry.
and then no, I scared me. And we started doing fanzines together back in the early days of fanzines.
Really?
Did a lot of fan work. I was going to be an artist. In the 8th grade,
I never knew that about you.
in the 8th grade, I had an art class back when schools actually gave art classes. And I drew a picture of a shark, of all things. And my art teacher says, that's really good. You could be a professional artist. And I said, are you serious? He said, absolutely. I said, well, good, I could be a comic book artist. And I became an arts major. I majored in art in high school and in college. Spent all my time learning how to draw to become a comic book artist. When Marv and I finally brought samples we had done together up to DC to try to get into the business professionally, we went to see Dick Giordano. And Dick wasn't even in the day. We went to show you how professional we were. We did make an appointment to show them. Because we used to show up a lot as fans. They knew who we were. And Dick wasn't in. And so we stood around and going, no. And at that point, Carmine Infantino, who was editorial director, came back from lunch with Joe Orlando, one of their editors, and recognized us. Hey, what are you kids doing? We want some samples to show them Mr. Giordano and see if we can get in the business as artists. And Carmine said, well, Dick's not in today, but if you want to show the stuff to my boy Joey here, if he likes you, you're in. So we sent the samples back with Joe. And he came out a half hour later, having looked them over, and said, well, the art, which is mostly what I have, not quite ready. It's got potential, but it's not there yet. But I like the writing, which is mostly what Marv had done. Really? If you guys want to submit stories to House of Mystery, which is the book I had just started, I'd love to see them. And at that point, that was a writer. I started submitting story ideas, and one of the stories in the first batch I submitted, Joe accepted, and I stuck with that from that point on. I mean,
don't you wish it was that easy now?
It's impossible. You really can't.
You can't just walk in to DC Comics at this point and be like, yeah, I want to talk to Jeff Johns.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, most of these I hear, so it's easy.
Well, yeah, well.
But the difference, too, is the world has become so litigious that you can't submit. DC, which used to invite submissions, now which says, if you read the indicia, it says no unsolicited submissions are accepted.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
It's incredible. So what was the book that you and Marv wrote? Do you remember the book that you
were doing? The first thing, I mean, we did a couple of separate short stories which came out later. But the first published thing we did, I guess it was Dick actually, not Joe. It was an issue of Teen Titans.
Oh, really?
The original run, issue 18.
Wow.
People bring that to me occasionally.
You
feel it creak.
So, you rose through the ranks pretty quickly.
I did. I killed a lot of people.
Yeah, I was going to say. So there's a trail of dead bodies to where you got.
Well, no one looked for them.
I mean, and what was it like back then? Was it just like you were just sitting at a typewriter all day long and just like, oh, what do you need? I got it, kind of thing?
There was a little of that. I mean, DC.
Were you actually in the offices at that point?
Well, they had a writer.
They did.
So
Who was in the writer's room with you?
Jerry Conway, Marv.
Wow.
A lot of guys.
But that just blows me away. What did you guys do? Just like, hey, I got this problem with Superman. What do you think, Jerry?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean,
really?
Well, although in the case of Superman or anything that Julius Schwartz edited, you did it with him. Julie loved being part of the press.
Yeah. What was Julie like? I met him at a convention one time, and I felt like I was hanging out with my grandpa. Just like I was really young at the time, but he was just like that guy, was just like, just tapping me on the arm and like wanted to tell you crazy jokes and stuff and tell you stories.
Without Julie Schwartz, we'd all be somewhere else.
We wouldn't have the Silver Age.
We wouldn't have an industry, I don't think, anymore.
Yeah.
Julie Schwartz not only helped found comics fandom, because he made it a point in his later columns to print the names and addresses, again, less litigious times, of everybody, so we could get in touch with one another.
Yeah.
He and Mort Wiseman were essentially 25 years earlier, the me and Marv of the beginning ages of science fiction fandom.
Yeah.
They had formed the first science fiction club. They formed the first science fiction fanzine. They were fans who evolved into editors and people who became, you know, Julie Schwartz was Ray Bradbury's first agent.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that.
I never knew that.
Oh yeah, all these things. So Julie was really, but in the office, Julie had a reputation for being one tough-ass SOB.
Really?
He was a tough guy, and he had an unconscious habit of walking down the hall with his hands in his pocket, shaking the change in his pocket. Didn't realize he was doing it, but it was like belling the cat. People heard the change rattle, and they all went in their office and rushed the doors.
They're like, Julie's on the warpath.
But Julie knew me and Marv and others from our fanzine work. And when I was still in the very early days of my freelance ship, trying to sell things to him, he shared an office at that point in time with Nelson Bridwell, the late, wonderful Nelson Bridwell. Mm-hmm. And I was there, I had an appointment, I had to make appointments. I had an appointment with Nelson to try to sell him some, like, either Jimmy Olsen or Lois Lane stories, back when they all had their own books. Mm-hmm. It was just work. And Nelson got called away to some other meeting, and I was sitting in his guest chair. You know, that was the office. The desk on this side, the desk on this side, editor's chair, guest chair, guest chair.
Wow.
And Julie was not moving. He was sharing a. I'm sitting there by myself, I'm waiting for Nelson to come back, and suddenly Julie comes storming into the room and sees me and recognizes me. You, what the hell are you doing here? I'm here to try to sell some stories to Mr. Bridwell. And he literally grabbed me by the scruff of my collar, pulled me out of Nelson's chair, dragged me across the room, dumped me in his guest chair, and says, "The hell you are! You're writing The Flash." I'm what? You're writing The Flash. Let's try it again. I'm what? You're writing The Flash. You couldn't possibly do a worse job than that SOB I just fired. So you're writing The Flash.
And that's how it all began.
That's how I started working for Julie.
Wow.
And we became dear friends afterwards. Everyone was still a friend for Julie. But one afternoon, after I'd been working for him for about a year, I guess, and I was in the office, because even when I worked from home, I tried to go to the office at least 3 or 4 times a week, just to drop off the pages I'd written, to have an excuse just to go to the office 3 or 4 times a week. And I wandered into Julie's office and was hunched over his desk, editing a script from someone. And I'm just watching. This is watching the great Julie Schwartz in the book. And suddenly, after about 2 or 3 minutes, he looks at me, sees me standing up and says, "What the hell are you doing here?" And I have no idea what prompted me to say this, but I looked at him and said, "Oh, nothing. I just thought I'd stand around and watch you grow senile." And he glared at me and glared at me. And then he started laughing so hard he fell out of his chair. And from that point on, we were friends. I mean,
he was sharp as a tick. Huh?
Oh, razor sharp. Even when I was editor-in-chief of Marvel, I would come over to DC once a week to have lunch with Julie. I mean, that was it. I loved him. He was everybody's uncle. But he was a meticulous man. He was married for many, many years to a lovely woman. He was a little neurotic. Mm-hmm. And he called her every day at 10 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, at 4 in the afternoon, just to say, "Hi, I'm alive." And she'd go, "That's nice," and hang up, because otherwise she'd get crazy. If he missed a minute, if he was in a meeting, she was sure he was dead. And he, as a guy who had been very social and very out there, during his marriage to Jean, he was very homely. He left the office on time, everything. Julie was crazy about time, everybody being on time. Much of the Flash stuff came out of Julie's own life. And
the fact that Barry Allen was always late.
Exactly. Well, he was late one day, missed the bus to school when he was a kid, missed an important test, and was the only failure he ever had in school. Wow. So it affected him for the rest of his life. But Julie never went anywhere, never went to conventions, all the stuff that he was indirectly, I got the word, indirectly responsible for, he never went to. He just, because Jean didn't want to be back, he didn't want to go. It was just the way he was. Wow. And ultimately she passed away. She had emphysema, she was a smoker. And we all figured it out. but Gene knows, Julie will be right there. But because of the disease, it lingered. There was a year of lingering. And by the time she passed, he had come to terms with it. And he was doing nothing. I mean, he was still going home every day, living his life. And Mike Gold had joined the DC staff. That was his first comics in Chicago.
Yeah.
And he was a good friend of Mars and said, you should bring Julie to come and guest of honor. And we said, you absolutely should. And we went to Julie and said, why don't you come with us to Chicago and be a guest of honor? Why would anyone care what I had to say? Julie, come with us. Just trust me. And we spent a week, we talked him into it. And he said, yeah, and then we're going to do like this, a spotlight on Julie. Oh, sorry. If you're dead, shut up. And, you know, trust me, it was a much bigger room. It was one of those, you know, Comic-Con from size room. And it was packed to the gills. And Julie was terrified. And we said, look, you know we love you. We're not going to leave you on your heels. We'll walk you through the hour and a half. We'll feed you questions. We'll keep you busy. No one, and besides, everyone in this room, look at these people. They all love you. They want to see you. They're here for this. And he goes, okay, let's try this. And the panel, you know, was really short, standing ovation. Everybody sat down. And I turned to Julie and I said, so Julie, tell us about your career. And we were done. No one else said a word but Julie for the next hour and a half. And he was wonderful.
It's true. I was. I watched. I think it was like probably 84 or something like that. I saw him on a panel, like my very first Comic-Con, and he was on the DC panel, and it turned into him. It turned into the Julie show. It always did. Sorry guys, we turned this into the Julie Schwartz appreciation panel, but
because he's infinitely entertaining.
Yeah,
had stories about.
Everybody has a Julie story. That's the thing. When I, you know, anytime I've met somebody that's worked with him, everybody ends up with a Julie Schwartz story because they're hilarious.
He was a legend.
Yeah.
And brilliant. I mean, I consider him one of my major mentors.
I was going to say, so he was kind of like your shepherd into the whole industry.
In many ways, yeah. I mean, I worked for a lot of people. I am strangely lucky in that I was the last writer to work with a lot of the classic editors, guys who retired or passed. I was one of the last guys to work with them, so I learned a great deal from the original generation of comic editors, especially at DC and at Marvel. Stan was Marvel when I worked for Stan.
We'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. And I was one of the first writers to work with the next great generation of editors. So I've learned a lot from all.
You've had a lot of people, and there's a lot of people in your I'm sure.
Oh yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. So, how long were you at DC?
Ultimately, if you discount the couple of years I was at Marvel, my whole career.
Really?
I mean, I'm a freelancer, so I work every year.
But I mean, you were in-house at DC for how long? Before you went over to Marvel?
Well, I was about, let's say, 3 years.
Oh, it was that short? It seems like
3 or 4 years.
When you look at your body of work, it looks like you were there for a while.
Well, I ended up at Marvel by accident.
Okay. So tell me that story. How did you end up over at Marvel then?
When I moved from the house I grew up in, I moved into an apartment with Jerry Cobb. You know, sharing an apartment. Mm-hmm. Jerry left DC much earlier than I did over Marvel, and had become one of their top writers very quickly because there weren't that many books or that many writers. So he did a lot of stuff. You know, Stan wrote a few things still, Roy, and then there was Jerry, who was kind of like a third writer in the row. At some point, without mind being anything over, as I was hitting my stride at DC, and I was writing the Justice League and the Phantom Stranger and a number of other books, Roy and Jerry decided I should be working for Marvel. I never told them. So what would happen is Jerry would come home from work one day and say, hey, listen, I'm leaving Marvel team up. You want to write that? Spider-Man? Yeah, sure. I'll take that. So I took it. I ended up having to give up a DC book because there was so much time in it.
Yeah.
I'm giving up so-and-so. You want to write Thor? You want to write? And I got up one morning and went, oh, for Marvel. Man. Because I had to keep giving up DC books and taking them to Marvel. And, you know, everyone, they like me at DC still. Yeah. And I became a writer for Marvel, and then I was a freelancer, so I was still doing some work for DC.
Yeah.
And then 6 months into my tenure at Marvel, I got asked to be an assistant editor. No, it was 3 months. I'm sorry, 3 months after this.
Assistant to him?
To Roy. Was editor.
Oh, really? So what was working with Roy like?
Well, I'll be fine. But 6 months after that, Roy comes to me one day and says, look, I decided to give up being editor-in-chief. I would like you to replace me.
Holy.
I'm going, I don't turn 25 till next week. I'm going to be editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics. And he said, yeah. I said, okay.
Without even thinking about it.
Well, and trust me, I should have. Because you will note there was a period between Roy and Jim Shooter where they went through an editor every year and a half. Yep. Because it was an impossible job. There was not a comic book company with an editor-in-chief and a half dozen editors. It was a comic book company with an editor-in-chief and 55 books a month to produce. You couldn't do that and keep saying. And so each person in turn got fewer books because Roy had been smart enough to say, when I leave the editor-in-chiefship, I'm going to keep this many books to write, and I will edit them myself because, after all, I run the company I know how.
Yeah.
And they said, sure. So when I left the editor-in-chiefship, I said, what do you do? And I was editing and writing the Fantastic Four, and the Amazing Spider-Man, and Thor, and the Incredible Hulk, and random other things. So the next guy, Marv, had a few less books to edit.
Yeah.
And then Marv did the same thing with you.
And so eventually, after Marv was Jerry, right?
Yeah, Jerry blinked. I think.
Like 2 years or something?
No, maybe 3 weeks.
No.
And editor-in-chief, he was there for 3 weeks.
Really?
Yeah, he came in after having been very disappointed to have not gotten the job when Roy left it, because after all he had been Roy's son.
Yeah.
And after 3 weeks, went, got it. Now I see why.
Now I see why I didn't do it.
Back to writing.
So what was it like at Marvel? Did you
Marvel,
have
Marvel was the Wild West.
Yeah.
Marvel was great fun because we were winging it by the skin of our teeth.
What year was this?
72, 73.
Wow.
Into the early 70s.
That was when I was
And I mean, my favorite story. One day during my editor-in-chiefship, I'm sitting in my office and a bunch of suits come in. And they say, hi, we're the accountants. I said, no, really? And they, we just went over the books. We're not making our bottom line. You need to add 4 books to the line immediately to help boost our bottom line.
That's not easy.
So I said, okay. Took my whole staff, all the staff was assistant editors in the production group. Took all the assistant editors out to lunch and said, all right, here's the problem. People told us we need 4 more books. What would be good? And we spent the lunch hour coming up with 4 books we thought were viable under the circumstances. Went back to the office, figured out who was the best to write it, who was available, the best to draw it, who was available, called them up, assigned them the books. 6 weeks later, those first issues were on the stands.
Wow. What were the books? Do you remember?
The Champions,
Nice.
The Inhumans, Mildred the Mystic, and Bloodstone.
Wow.
Those were the 4 books.
All great books.
Yeah, they were fun.
A couple of them stuck around.
20 years later, when I was freelancing back in DC again, after I moved to the West Coast and moved up my leadership and all the rest of that, I pitched, they were doing those Never, author work books too, and I pitched Nevermore, the Batman Edgar Allan Poe to Bob Schreck, who was editing those books. He said, oh, I like this, I'll pass it on, we'll see how long. 3 years to the day after I pitched it, I got to go ahead to actually start writing the book. And I'm thinking, this book would have been on the year's stand for 2.5 years and canceled by now at Marvel when I was running it.
So, when you were at Marvel, a couple things happened.
No.
A couple things.
Such as?
You're responsible for a few things that kind of changed things at Marvel, right?
Yes.
There's an issue with the Hulk that you wrote,
yes,
that somebody named, I think it was Wolverine?
Yes.
You get this all the time. You have to stand for a speech, don't
I
you?
really want to just publish a book with me.
You should. You just like, oh, you're here for the Len Wein speech? Yeah, just here's the Wolverine story, and then we'll talk about everything else.
I really should do that. That's a great idea.
I know, and when we when I found out that I was going to talk to you, I'm like, can we not talk about Wolverine? But I'm sure everybody here wants to hear the story. That's one of the reasons why I'm here.
Okay, when I published the book, I want you guys to all buy copies.
So, how did it come about? I've heard the story, so I know.
It's a collection of different things. I mean, it starts with Roy. Roy Thomas came to me and actually, no, it doesn't. It starts with Brother Voodoo. I was reading a book called Brother Voodoo, which was set in the Caribbean. And I love writing accents. I've got an ear for different voices.
Yes, you do.
So I would write the accents in. And one day, you know, it was a strip I loved. I thought it was one of the best things I've ever done. Still ran 6 issues. So, which what I know. And Roy calls me in and says, look, I've been reading Brother Voodoo and I hate you. And I said, thanks. He said, well, no, I just can't write accents. I've never been able to do it. And I really admire your ability to write accents. I would like you to write a Canadian accent. So I have a name, Wolverine, and give me a Canadian character so I can hear you with Canadians.
Wow. So it came out as a challenge.
It did.
I've never heard that story.
And I went home and did what writers don't do this much anymore, but we used to do all the time. I did research. And I discovered Wolverines were short, hairy, nasty little creatures with razor-sharp claws who were fearless and would take on creatures 10 times their size. I said, well, that was 3 minutes and I'm done. Because that's exactly who he is. And that's where he came from. All the other stuff that's ever evolved out of him comes with the natural evolution of a character who's around for 40 years.
Yeah.
But that was the initial where he came from.
And you just thought it was a one and done kind of thing.
Yeah, well,
like it was going to be those 2 issues and...
No, nothing's ever one and done. You know, when Zuma comes back, you know, anybody can. But when I was designing and creating him, I decided there had been rumors going on for several years about possibly reviving the X-Men book as an international team of heroes.
So it would be, as you were creating Wolverine,
yes,
there was already rumblings about bringing back the X-Men.
I decided to make him a mutant, so that
there was
whoever
a
got that
possibility.
book would have a Canadian mutant if they wanted.
Interesting. Okay.
I did not know I would be the guy who got it. It was funny.
We'll get to the X-Men in a minute.
Okay, fair enough.
So with Wolverine though.
Yes.
Now, I'd always heard that the claws were supposed to be, they were supposed to be gloves.
Yes, when I created him, the adamantium claws were part of the gloves. Because I still don't understand if you've got these things back here, clean into your wrist.
They finally figured it out, but in the movies they come out of the palm or something.
No,
like
in the movies they come out.
Oh, that's right, between
so
the
they
fingers.
can hold the thing.
Yeah.
You know, and hold it.
Yeah.
But it made sense to me, since I still don't think a real person who's ever bent his wrist without cutting his hands off, that they were gloves. And the things, because adamantium is indestructible, it doesn't need to be anything more than 1 molecule thick.
Yeah.
So they telescope. They snap out the place where those things happen. And
that's what the little
yeah, exactly.
bumps were basically.
And they didn't tear off, because that would be the next logical thing to put them on there.
Yeah.
And the first time it hits a metal thing, they tear off.
Yeah.
So the gloves were adamantium covered in cloth. So
okay.
It made complete sense to me.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, and then Chris and Dave decided, well, wouldn't it be cool if they came out of his actual arms? And they didn't care if they moved his wrists and out and that's where he went from there.
So, with the X-Men, that was a book that, at that point, had been gone, off the shelf.
Stan and Jack's only real failure.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is weird to say now, that book was a failure. But it lasted for a while.
It lasted about 93 years.
Yeah.
But for about 30 of those 93 years, maybe even more, it was a reprint.
Yeah.
In the early
Yeah.
Stan and Jack only lasted, I think, 10 issues.
Yeah.
And when they started not going to second stringers, but for some reason they kind of moved on to third stringers, they just weren't doing a good job.
But it was also, correct me if I'm wrong, it was also had this weird fandom to it. That
Well,
there were X-Men fans out there, and Roy was a big fan of them.
Very much so. It went through a period of, well, we're printing it again, to suddenly, oh, here's a few issues by Steranko, to here's now a run by Neil Adams and Roy, which is one of the best runs ever.
It's one of my favorite, yeah.
Great lines. I mean, Roy at the height of his powers as a writer. Some of the best punchlines and captions. The page where the sentinels all go into the sun is one of the most well-written things I've ever read.
Yeah.
The great page where they meet the good-looking silver-haired guy in a savage land, and then the last panel, as he puts on his Magneto helmet, he says, "I guess it's true. Clothes really do make the man," which is a great punchline.
Roy was a master at his craft.
Yeah, he was terrific when he was doing that book. But the book still never recovered the momentum.
So was it kind of your mission, or did you?
Well,
it was more Roy's idea to bring it back.
Roy was a fan of the old Black Hawk book at DC. Black Hawk was by an international team of pilots who became adventurers after the war and stuck around for many years. It's a long-run book. But somebody upstairs, one of the suits, had discovered that a lot of the Marvel books were doing very well in a specific handful of foreign countries. And it was actually his idea, you know, if we published books starring characters in those countries, we could probably make a bundle of those books over there. So that's how it all evolved. And then the book got a go-ahead, and Roy decided the original choice, and I think I know that it's not my book, wasn't going to do a great job, and looked at me and said, "Would you like to do this book?" I said, "I guess who's going to draw it?" I said, "Dave Coppin." I said, "Yep." Because Dave,
without even thinking about it.
Dave is, again, he was also a member of our fanzine, our fanzine.
Oh, really?
Briefly, but never. But he was a great guy, a friend of mine, and one of my favorite artists. I always loved his design. So they said, "Go, make a book." And we sat down. I picked Wolverine up, going, "Well," and I'm sitting there.
You were like, "Yeah, they're kind of creative."
Yeah, what are we going to do with the rest? Let's think it through. And so Dave had 2 or 3 huge notebooks full of costume designs because he loved designing costumes.
Yeah.
And we went through the books, and we kind of.
I wish that still was around.
Nightcrawler he had already created. Nightcrawler he had created to be a member of the Legion of Superheroes.
Oh,
and
really?
Murray Boltinoff, the editor, thought he was too creaky, and so he didn't want to use it. So, bingo, we got Nightcrawler, we adjusted the costume, we adjusted most of the costumes a little bit, some of them were a little too busy. We went through Colossus. They didn't have names. Nightcrawler was the only one that but there was this great visual that we said it should be a Russian guy named Colossus. And then we had 2 other characters. Well, we picked up Starfire, or Sunfire rather, to have a Japanese
character.
Banshee, so we could have an Irishman.
And Thunderbird.
Thunderbird, who was created to die. Everyone
I was going to say, he was your red shirt.
Yeah, he was a little superfluous if you look at his powers. The whole idea was nobody had ever done that before. So the brand new book with brand new characters and kill one of them off.
Yeah.
The idea was you'll never know what's coming next. And God knows that's been that book's history ever since.
Of course.
But
and then you had Jean and Scott.
Well, no, Jean was not part of the original crew. Scott was the only real hangover of the regular X-Men.
Yeah.
And then we had 2 other characters. A character called Black Cat, who was a black woman with luck powers, obviously, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And a character called Tempest. He had Tempest with Typhoon. I've never remembered who. He was a guy who controlled the weather. And as we evolved the book, everybody was working out terrific. Black Cat, Marvel later created his own Black Cat for Spider-Man. But Black Cat and let's go with Tempest. Just working. Did my personality, like the powers on one, like the, and we went to write. So we read it, and I said, "Look, everything's great." And he goes, "Oh my God, that's all great." This one is just these 2 are. What are we missing? And he looks at me and said, "Well, one's got great powers, one's got a great visual look, and a more interesting personality. Why don't you just make one character out of it?" And so they became Storm.
That's great.
And that's why she used to have those cat's eyes in the early on.
Oh, really?
Because they were too cool and visual, even though they made no sense in it. We just thought it's still cool. And that's how the X-Men. Now the funny thing is, you'll note as I tell the story, at no point did anybody from upstairs ever come down and tell us what countries the books were being successful. So we just pick our own countries, well, that seemed cool to us. And so to this day, I haven't know if we saw the next book.
But it was a good idea.
It was a great idea.
It was that. Sold a few copies still.
Yeah, we've done all right.
Yeah. So, the next issue though, you're not on it.
Well, what happened is, during that period, Roy, remember what Roy editor-in-chief?
Mm-hmm.
By the time the book had come out, I was now editor-in-chief. And I'm going, well, you know, you really can't run the entire company and write 5 books a month. So I started giving the books away.
Really?
I just, well, it's to keep my sanity and also my marriage. That ultimately didn't work, but that should. So I started giving them up, and I got down to 2 books. I had the Incredible Hulk, which was still arguably, I think, my longest run on me. And the X-Men. And I said, geez, I gotta give up one, I don't know what to do. And I'm sitting in the editor-in-chief's office, which was a cubicle, its own office within the bullpen. Yeah. And here's all my assistants, my proofreaders, and Chris Claremont, who recently became one of my assistants.
I was going to say, he was an assistant.
Right, a couple of other people. And as I say, gee, I wonder if I should give up. No, Chris starts pinballing his arms. Look, I'll take the X-Men. If you want to give it up, I'll do the X-Men over here. Look, me, see X-Men. Look, I'll sell myself a fire so you notice the X-Men. And I said, look, anybody who wants that book that desperately deserves a shot. If I had known, I never would have given him that. But that's, I mean,
you create it's your fault.
Yeah, for the next 17 years.
The longest running writer on X-Men.
On X-Men, certainly. Not on books, because Bob Canada, God bless his weird soul, did 20-odd years of Wonder Woman and Sergeant Rock and things like that.
Really? I didn't know that he was on it that long.
Wow. Over 20 years on both books. Jeez. You know, I mean, Bob Canada fought World War II 5 times longer than America.
Oh, Len, you have to have just amazing stuff. So when Chris took over the book, you were an X-Men fan, obviously.
Yeah.
Did you have any guidance, or were you just like, go do your thing?
Not fair. If he start, as he went on over the years, and I was no longer editor, but still his friend, I would turn to him occasionally and go, a little suggestion for the X-Men? Finish a story eventually. You've got 15 stories.
You have this guy walking through a field for 4 issues. What is he doing?
But otherwise, it wasn't my place, once I stopped being the editor, to tell him what to do.
Yeah.
And it wasn't fair. You know, nobody really ever told me what to do.
Yeah.
After I got my feet under me in my career. So, also, you know, people always ask me, well, how do you feel about what people do with your characters after you left them? And my response is, gee, I wonder how Cecil and Schuster and Stan and Bob Kane or Bill Finger more accurately, or folks that feel about what I do with their characters when I wrote it. It's not fair for me to go, mine. You know, it's part of your creating the modern mythology.
Well, that ruins that next question. Thanks, man.
I'm sorry. Okay, go down.
No, so do you still read the books that you helped create or anything like that? Do you follow Wolverine or X-Men or anything?
How do I put this forward? There are too damn many books being published. I have 2 options. I can read all the books being published or have a life. And so I kind of got...
Wait, you're saying I don't have a life? Thanks.
You're very welcome. It's just,
I don't even read all the X books anymore.
I don't read. I read almost none of the X books. I was reading Wolverine for a while. I read Astonishing when Joss was writing it. Obviously, I know Joss and a fan of his work. And so, but overall, I still read the books I like as a fan.
Yeah. What are you?
I stuck with Swamp Thing for most of its run. You know, obviously I hired Alan, so I stuck with that. And long after I stuck with it, that was good. I stuck with Rick Veitch's run, which I thought was very well written, and then it went, and so I stopped reading the book, because I just didn't like it.
Yeah.
Now, in the current revival, because I hated all the ones in between the Vertigo, and Karen Burton was my, not apprentice, she was my, I was her teacher. I would, yes, she was my protege.
I'm correcting Len Wein. How cool is that?
It's getting old. You know, I'm happy I remember my pants things. Most days. No, Cameron, I just didn't think Cameron ever quite figured out how to do the book. That's very good.
It's not an easy.
No, it isn't. But you know, so I've been reading it under Scott Snyder and Charles Soule.
And you're enjoying it. Charles is doing a great job.
Yeah, I think both of them really done. Well, part of the problem with Karen was she refused to admit that Swamp Thing really belongs in the DCU. He needs to interact with the rest of that universe.
Yeah.
That's where he gets interested.
That's what Alan Moore did so well with that one.
Exactly.
That was, oh, man. Okay. We're getting way ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, and also running out of time.
We are. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah. Oh, cool. No, you.
Oh, Black Shirt.
A lot of people always surprised they're actually deep.
Yeah, I know.
The question I want to ask you yesterday when you were with, what's your name, Marv and Jerry.
That's his name.
Swamp Thing.
Yes.
You know, all the iterations that were in the movies, I know the first one by Wes Craven, then they did a sequel that had Heather Locklear in it. Then I believe there was a TV series on USA for.
Yes, there was. 70-something episodes.
Yeah, how did you feel about the, you know, did you like any of those interpretations? And is Swamp Thing ready to come back to the audience?
Oh, okay. I wrote a screenplay for Joel Silver about 10 years ago for a new Swamp Thing.
Oh, wow.
Part of the problem, the only thing that's kept it from getting made, at least for most of the 10 years, was, believe it or not, there were rights problems. No one knows who ended up with the rights that got sold to a lot of people.
That was the New Line thing, right?
Something. It got very complicated, and it's still not fully resolved, but mostly resolved. Now what's changed things is Guillermo del Toro, who's a friend of mine also. I don't like him. And,
you know a few.
Yeah. Guillermo is the world's biggest Swamp Thing fan. And he's been talking about doing the Justice League Dark book and wants Swamp Thing as a member, obviously, because he's in the book as well. And so they can finally do it right. They can do, well, I mean, the first meeting I had with Joel Silver, he said, I got only one thing about this movie that matters. I said, what? He said, if we're going to do this, we're doing it right. We're going to do Swamp Thing CGI, not a guy in a rubber suit. I said, twist my arm. And so that's it. It's going to go big budget and it goes. I think most of the people who have worked on the various incarnations of the character out of comics have done the best they can with what they've had. And what they've had is basically bus fare. They really haven't had much money to work with. And I think that's the problem. There are moments in that first movie by Wes that are really nice. They're sweetly done, but then they get silly because they had no money to do things. So you work with what you got.
So you're saying right now, kind of like how Spider-Man was before Raimi did, there's a lot, no one knows where who gets the rights to it. Okay, yeah. Wow.
And so Raimi did a great job with, and Sam is a huge fan of Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, question?
I wanted to ask you about Green Lantern.
Okay.
I know you were writing the book, and
Yes.
I think you were also editing it in the
Yes,
early
for about
80s.
two and a half years.
And you did a really big thing, actually. You made Jon Stewart the main character of the book, which I know you didn't create him, but you were the one to actually make him a leading character.
Yeah, I was, after the one story Denny O'Neil did, I was the next person to use him several times.
Yeah.
I had him show up in the issue of Justice League and step in for Hal, and then he took over for Hal again. And I was writing the book with Dave Gibbons.
Yeah, and I was just wondering what your thought process was behind replacing Hal Jordan with Jon Stewart, because it led to a lot of stuff. Eventually, him being on the cartoons. And
I love Hal. I still love it. And I love Green Lantern.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it actually.
And after about the first 6 months to a year, I started realizing what I thought. It's like, geez, most of the stuff I really wanted to do with Hal has been done by other people over the decades in various ways. I don't know what to do. What do I? So I turned him off. We stood right and we go, I'm not having fun on this book. I can't believe the book I waited my whole career to write. I'm not enjoying it. What do I do? And he looks at me and says, then change it. I said, what do you mean? He says, the book's called Green Lantern, not Hal Jordan. You know, make somebody else Green Lantern. And I went, oh, hell. And I went, because I always liked Jon Stewart. I went to John also. I just thought, you know, another character, multi-ethnic, somebody who's not another white guy, superheroes, good for the industry. I've never cared about people's races, nationality, sexuality. You know, Storm was never Black Storm when I created her. She was Storm. You know, Lucius Fox was black because I thought we needed more diversity.
Brother Voodoo.
Well, what he needed to be like was all set in essentially where that's predominant. I mean, so that's how John ended up as Green Lantern. And, you know, that story, and I knew it's a story. You know, these are all stories. They end eventually, they resolve. Stan used to talk about the illusion of change. He says, you know, I want you to write stories where things seem to be happening and stuff's going on and everything's changing. And when you're done, that you'll all really be back at square one. Because the basics are what makes the characters work. So we lie. For a living. I mean, all right, I don't know how many folks from this room. The big thing for Marvel is late this summer, early this fall, is the death of Wolverine. How many people believe that's permanent? What? I've done a lot of these. How many people in this room, raise your hand, believe that Wolverine's actually going to stay dead? I mean, nobody? Come on. Duh.
You don't kill off your character then.
Yeah, the guy's basically keeps your company intact. Yeah. I mean, he's actually superseded Spider-Man, as the #1 merchandising everything. If you look at all of the Marvel merch, Spidey's right next door, second, Wolverine's in front of everything.
Seriously? Wolverine suppressed Spider-Man?
Oh,
wow. Okay.
So
that's gotta make you feel good a little bit, right?
Yeah, God, yes.
You know, you're like something that I just Roy Thomas and go, and here it is. It's been huge merchandise.
It's changed my life in all sorts of ways. It's really is.
Are you a fan of the movies and what's been done with them? Yeah.
Well, I in terms of most of the big movie stuff, even the TV stuff, some of this, I have been extraordinarily lucky in the actors. Geez, I got Halle Berry, I got Alan Cumming, all of them. When I hired Hugh, he was not the guy they originally wanted to play the character.
Yeah.
It was New Gray Scott, who was making Mission Impossible 2 at the moment, and broke his ankle, and so everything got pushed back, and he had to step out. Mm-hmm. And as I like to say, I believe the most talented person in Hollywood is the casting director who looked at Hugh Jackman playing Curly in Oklahoma on the West End in London, and he said, oh yeah, he could be the most dangerous man on earth. And he was right. You know, Hugh's become a dear friend, which is a love because he's one of the nicest men on earth. Yeah. Just invited us to dinner when we're next to New York. I said, nice. Okay. Yeah. We'll go soon. We'll figure out how to get it.
Say that.
So I met Sir Ian McKellen last summer at the big panel for this year's movie, and I introduced myself, and he said, oh, my dear boy, thank you so much, and gave me a big hug. Wow. I had worse afternoons.
It's got to blow your mind.
It does.
Every day.
It does. The people who are fans of mine and have many cases become friends as a result.
That's so great.
Yeah, we throw summer parties and I look around the house and if I could only go back until my 15-year-old, where I'd be living and who would be hanging out in my backyard.
So, when so I'm a little bit of a Marvel fan.
Well, I'm both. I'm a
huge Marvel. I'm underselling.
I'm still talking to you.
I know. So, tell me your favorite Stan Lee story.
About himself.
About him, like your favorite interaction with him, something witty.
I have three great Stans. I'll keep the one of them for last, although it's the earliest story. Right after I became editor-in-chief, I went to LA for my first San Diego. Spent a week, living with Mark Evanier because he's an old buddy, and would always put me up. Mark used to say, Comic-Con's never officially over till you leave town. Since I moved to LA in '86, I think that con's still going on. But I was in town after I spent a week after the con. I went to Disneyland because how do you not? Exactly. And I thought, if I go back to the office and I don't bring toys, they're going to yell at me. And then we all went blind. Thanks. It's a miracle! Thank you. And so I bought Mickey Mouse hats, Mickey Mouse ears, with their names on it for my entire staff. And I came back to the office, and the first day I'm back, I handed out everybody's ears. And it's the end of the day. And the entire Marvel editorial staff is sitting at their desks, diligently working, all of them wearing Mickey the entire staff. And Stan, there was the bullpen, and Stan's office was on the same side of the hall. The next door over, there was the corner office. And Stan's leaving for the day, and the bullpen doors open. And Stan walks past me, with a briefcase in hand, on his way out for the day. And you could almost hear the double take. Goes past the door, and I could sense something had happened. And 10 seconds later, this happened. I saw. And as he starts to move out, I go, to explain to him, he says, no, don't tell him. I don't think I want to know. And picked up his bag and left. That's one of my, the other favorite story is when Jim Shooter was one of my assistants did. He and I just got macho at each other. We would do all kinds of arm wrestling shit just because we were in our 20s and had a lot of testosterone. Of course. And one day, we were Indian wrestling, not arm wrestling. You know, Indian wrestling, you put your feet side by side, and you grab the opposite arm, and then you try to throw the other guy out of the way.
He's a big guy.
He's a big guy.
Then
I was a pretty big guy too. I remember.
I just mean size.
Yeah, no, I was.
His legs probably past you.
I was pretty well packed. I once picked up Tony Isabella by the shoulders and literally said, "Look, don't do that ever again."
Wow. Tony was not a small guy either.
He was 5'5".
But
yeah.
Yeah.
So I was stronger though, a lot stronger. And neither, I mean, we would pop muscles rather than give in to the other way.
Wow.
And so we're Indian wrestling after hours in the bullpen, and the entire bullpen is circled us to watch this thing go on. And at one side,
it's like my Marvel Fight Club.
Yeah. And at one side is Roger Stern. Roger's also not a large man, but one of my favorite people. A really sweet guy, Roger. And we're pitching back and forth, and suddenly the two of us lurch, both of us, and this has got to be between us about 400 pounds of muscle. And we lurch, and we slammed Roger, and Roger went airborne. Roger literally left the ground, thank God didn't hit anything until he went through the bullpen door, airborne, and hit the wall on the opposite side, and slid down. So his legs are spread limb. Remarkably enough, with our timing being what it was, thank God, 3 seconds before Stan walked off. Otherwise, we'd have plowed right into Stan. Stan, being Stan, stepped over, didn't break strides, stepped over four of Roger's outstretched legs, looked into the bullpen, so me and Shooter, War went, "Stay alive, man!" And we have time for one more. One more, yeah. This is not necessarily Stan in the best light, but apparently in the very early '60s, when Marvel was the tiny little offices, I used to have a closet in Marvel office. Somebody phoned in a bomb, and Stan got the message. And Stan said, "Oh, great," and picked up his hat, picked up his briefcase, and went home. And did not call the office and tell the other people in the office, "There's been a bomb threat, you should probably leave," till he got home. But that's Stan.
I've heard that story before. Yeah, a couple people have that one.
Yeah.
Len, thank you so much for taking the time. This will actually be we recorded this for a podcast. It will be up in a couple weeks on geekplay.com. So come by our booth. We're in the cosplay corner.
And come by and see the geeks against the net.
Oh yeah. Well, we did that.